So today I'm super excited to welcome David Moatazedi to my Take 5 series. And David is the CEO of Evolus, which many of you know. And Evolus has Jeuveau, which came out late last year. Is that right, David?
Yeah,
and,
we launched in May.
And David is going to talk to us a little bit about what's going on with Evolus. There was some news last week with Evolus, and I think we should touch on that. But I really want to get an idea of what is Evolus going to do, how are they going to emerge from the market, and how are they going to stimulate the market? What are they going to do for us as physicians and also for the consumer? So David, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
All right, David, you got to tell me 5 questions, okay? So your question number 1, these aren't going to be easy questions.
Sure.
Question number 1, how will COVID affect Evolus? Since it already has affected Evolus, in the long term, how does this affect your company?
Well, I think for all of us, COVID has affected the aesthetic space overall, as you know. And in many ways for us, it's given us greater conviction to pursue the path we were heading down, right? In many ways, we're a virtual company in that we have a digital platform that customers have engaged with from the inception of launch. And so we see digital not only playing a bigger role in everything we all do, hence the interview we're doing now, but also moving forward in a post-COVID environment. And that whole process of integrating digital activity into everything we do is accelerated as a result of this. And some of the changes that we've recently announced, as you know, we're a company with less than a year on the market. And for us, controlling the cash burn, like you and others in medical practices, is very important at this stage in our company's life. And so we had to make some challenging decisions in terms of how we change the structure of our operation, but in a lot of ways enabling us to accelerate where we were already headed, which is to have a greater digital footprint. Now, that being said, I think the role of a sales rep is critical in this industry. How it evolves as a result of COVID in terms of interaction within a practice, I think that's something that we'll have to watch closely. Clearly, they're going to play a slightly different role in the near term. I think that's important for all manufacturers to share in that responsibility of ensuring patient safety is first. But look, we have the ability to make sure that product gets shipped to the customer directly through that app, that there's price transparency through it, as well as the ability to pay bills or interact with us directly, whether that's our sales force or medical affairs, all from the palm of your hand. And so we think that's an advantage, and thousands of customers around the country are using that application, and we're going to keep investing behind it to try to drive that shift towards making it a touchless.
Okay, I want to ask a little more specifically here, because you guys have always been on the cutting edge when it comes to being virtual, and you've had a concerted effort to go after the millennials who seem to be more applicable with a virtual world. Is this something that you were always planning, and this just accelerates you into that? And will we see a different Evolus afterwards, one that's more virtual, one in which the customer can engage directly to maybe get products and maybe not need sales reps as much? Is this something that was in the plans, and does this just accelerate you there? And are you a completely different company afterwards from your competitors, so to speak?
Yeah, I don't know that we're a completely different company. I think the role of a sales rep is critical in this field. As you know, they help with a lot of the planning around an account, whether that's patient event driven or practice planning and thinking about the future of the practice and how to help support the staff as you bring in new staff members and bringing them up to speed. So I do believe that the role of a medical sales professional is going to continue to be critical in this industry. That being said, I do believe that digital will play a bigger role for everyone. And I'm talking to doctors around the country over this weekend. I had a few conversations around how they're going to incorporate digital more into their practice to make that flow of that patient more of a touchless experience, so that that patient has less touch points in the practice, whether that be with staff or engagement when they're paying on their checking out process. And I think all of those factors will together represent a market that could look slightly different, at least in the near term. And then, of course, beyond that, I think it's too hard to tell at this point.
Okay, does the aesthetic patient change? Do you think it's a different patient? And does that alter the way you guys market?
Yeah, well, in the near term, yes. The economic uncertainty, I think, changes the view of the consumer into the space. From a consumer standpoint, they're going to be looking at practices to think about how they're taking the proper measures to ensure safety. In the end, this is a beauty space, and so the risk profile has to be marginalized. And I know practices are focusing on that. And there's quite a few webinars around the world that are being done to change the way that medicine could be practiced in the near term. I think long term, everything's intact. I do believe that there's a macro trend towards beauty, and that bias more positively to the younger demographic, so long as they have the pocketbook to be able to spend on procedures like that. That being said, the toxin space where we operate, it is the most affordable procedure for the value. And so $300 to $500 is a price point that if a consumer has the discretionary spend, it certainly does fall within that range of less than $1,000, which we think will be the more resilient side of the aesthetic space. But it's on the manufacturers to help you as practices continue to drive new patients in, and that requires some stimulus measures and concessions on everyone's part in order to help ensure this market's in a healthy place.
Okay, so you lead into question number 3. And question number 3 is, what is Evolus going to do to stimulate the market? Some of the other companies are extending terms or replacing expired product. How will you at Evolus help me as a doctor and also help the market?
Yeah, look, we're very eager to share a stimulus package that we've been working on, and that will be released in the coming weeks. We're thinking about things very differently. We know COVID impacts all practices, from the large to the small. It doesn't know any difference between the size of the practice. And we're also thinking about how do we keep these patients engaged beyond what everyone knows will be that pent-up demand that we're going to get whenever this market opens up, but what happens after that? And so we've been working very closely on a plan that we believe will address both of those needs. And we think that combination of thinking about the profitability in the end, if top line is impacted for practices, then the bottom line matters a lot. And so looking at ways we can improve profitability while keeping these patients engaged. So stay tuned for more of that. And then we have also done a few things in the interim. Even though we're a small company that, as I pointed out earlier, we've taken some measures to reduce our burn rate. We've done things for the customer as well to help them navigate through this period. We doubled our payment terms so that the accounts could have greater time to pay that back. And with our consumer coupons, we extended those as well. They were expiring at the end of March. Recognizing that a lot of accounts had shut down by the middle of March, we extended them through the end of the second quarter so that accounts could continue to benefit from those patient coupons that they had in their practice. So those are some small measures we've taken, but we're looking forward to introducing the bigger one here soon.
All right, so another question, this was not part of my 5 questions, but I just thought about this. Your toxin is originally from Korea, it's manufactured in Korea, and it's sold in Korea, I believe under a different name. But is there any insight you've gotten into the Korean market that helps you to better understand what's going to happen in America? Because they are somewhat emerging already from this crisis.
They are, and I had a conversation with our partner actually over the weekend, specifically about the markets there, and they're starting to see the market slowly reopen. They're roughly a couple months ahead of us, probably a month behind China though, and they're not quite at 50% just yet. So they're seeing practices opening up, and they are seeing some patients coming back in, but it's not quite back to full capacity there. But they remain optimistic that each week that goes by, the situation appears to be improving there, and they're introducing new measures within practices that give patients greater confidence in the safety of getting a procedure done.
All right, question number 4. If you were, which one day you probably will be, a professor at a university teaching business school, 10 years from now, what's the lesson you're going to teach that happened from this whole incident?
Yeah, look, it's going to likely, looking back, there's going to be so many things that we're not even going to think of today. Whether you want to look at it from the economic standpoint in terms of how it impacts different industries, how it impacts behavior. In the end, I think the Darwinian theory is at play here. Everyone is trying to understand what measures they'll have to take in the immediate term while they're cautiously optimistic about what you do in the long term. And that ability to adapt and recognize that the world is changing around us, whether we believe that's here to stay or not is something that we'll figure out with time. But I'm optimistic, having talked to a number of doctors in this space, that we are taking the proper measures to ensure patient safety is paramount when they come back in, that these practices will be healthy for the long term. We will recover from this. I have no doubt about that. Who knows what that time frame is till we get back to pre-COVID levels, but it's all about making the right decisions that are in the best interest of, for us, the doctors that do these procedures, and for you, for the patients that are coming in to ensure their safety. And I think that logic of that Darwinian theory of evolution applies to every industry in the space. And in the end, it's all one community that we operate in. And we realize that when it all shuts down with calls like this or calls amongst your peers, that we're all in this together, and our ability to come out of this together and be stronger for it is going to be a function of just making sure that we make the right decisions for the long term and make the right changes in the near term to adapt. Yeah, I'm optimistic about the future. Clearly making tough decisions on reducing your spend impacts employees and headcount. And look, that's the last thing you want to do when you're building a company is make tough decisions like that. That being said, we intend to be here for the long term. We're well capitalized. We had 100 million roughly on our balance sheet at the end of the first quarter, and that's adequate capital for us to continue to operate. And fortunately, we've had a very strong base of supporters. We have a long way to go, but we have to preserve our burn in order to be here for the long haul. So I'm optimistic about the future and where it's going, and it will look different to some degree.
All right, question number 5, your last question. What do you miss the most? And what's the first thing you're going to do right when this whole thing ends and you're able to be released and go out and...
Yeah, well, probably like many of you, social interaction, I crave it. I think we've all sort of wondered, and I know you're a thinker, Steve, that what would the world look like if it were entirely digital, if you take that end of the spectrum. I think we got the opportunity to see what it looks like. And look, in some ways it's efficient, in other ways it's incredibly inefficient. And I think we are going to quickly find the right balance of the two sides of what could we actually be doing digitally that we don't have to fly somewhere or require a patient to come in for a consult and maybe get better efficiency out of a practice or a business in doing so. But at the same time, I think we all realize that touch, that human interaction, that ability to be in a room together and stimulate each other, there's a unique dimension to it that's just not realized yet digitally. And I am looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to it personally and professionally, to be honest with you. And what I'm looking forward to most is my wife and I were just talking about this over the weekend. We want to have a barbecue when things open back up, just have a bunch of friends over and fill the house. And I don't know how far out that idea is, but it sounds like a lot of fun.
Well, I'm free next Tuesday. I'm teasing. No, I love your answer, and you just actually motivated me. The thought, what you're talking about is like, I agree with you 100%. You know, this virtual world is efficient in some respects, but there's also inefficiencies to it. And there's ways that we all communicate with each other that happens when you're face to face. And we're not able to explain that well, but I believe it's embodied senses to some extent. So yeah, I believe that we need that still, and that's not going to be replaced just yet. All right, David, thanks so much. We did 5 questions. It was supposed to be 5 minutes, but of course we went over like we always do when we talk. But your answers were great. It was good to get some insight into Evolus, and hopefully the people out there will have a better idea of what you did and why you did it and where you guys are headed.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate the time.
All right, we'll talk soon.
Well, bye-bye.